My name's Brett Kelly. Craig Bullock he was over there. There he is, right there. We'd like to welcome you here tonight. I really want to share one very quick story, and then I'll hand over to Eddie Jones. People that know me well know that when I'm walking along the streets or wherever I am, I like to keep my eyes open for opportunities. And one day, Craig and I just started a firm with the help of a lot of people in this room that we really appreciate. And we were standing at the lights up there in North Sydney. And I'm thinking, yep, chat, Craig, chat. And I look to my left, and there's Eddie Jones. He's just standing there. Unsuspectingly, we said, oh, hello, Mr. Jones, how you going? How's life up there with the Reds now? Must be different from doing that other job, and, you know, how you going? And, you know, we walk across the street, been talking for 5 minutes, and then we say, well, great to meet you, just near the post office there up at North Sydney. And then as I walked off, I thought, oh, gee, I really should have asked him to speak to a group of friends of the firm and clients and anyone interested. And so I did. I turned back and I said, oh, Mr. Jones, one thing, if there's any chance that you could come and talk to some of the friends and clients of the firm, that would be really great. Because a year ago we had another guy, rugby person, speak to a group of people, and they really seemed to enjoy that. So there was only one catch. Craig and I pulled out our card and said, you know, I'm Mick Kelly and he's the Bullock. We just started this firm, we don't have any money. We've got a few clients, and hopefully that'll all change. Is there any chance that you'd do that for us? And he was very generous enough to say that, you know, if you bug me enough, I might do that one day. I don't think they were exactly the words, but I did certainly bug him and sent plenty of emails. And so that's how Eddie has been so kind to come and talk tonight. Now, I've asked him to talk about lessons from elite sport for business. That was just my topic. So he's free, as I've said, to speak about whatever he likes. And hopefully you'll find that interesting. Format of the night is after Eddie speaks for about half an hour, he needs to go. So if anyone wants to get a photo with him, you need to take them between here and the door. Get Simon there to get a photo. And then after that, there's in the next room, just in case you thought it was so tight we would buy you a beer or a water. There's water and I think 2 or 3 beers. There's some finger food. So without me talking anymore, I'd just like to thank you for all coming and hand over to Eddie.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. If the firm is as persistent as they were in getting me here, I'm sure they're going to do well. So if you're associated with them, I think you're on a winner. It was the most unusual circumstance. I usually charge for these sort of things, and I'm doing this because of the persistence of Kelly and Bullock. But quite happy to be here, and it's good to see, you know, young guys getting out there and trying to set up a business and do well. It was just after I got sacked as a Wallaby coach. So I was trying to draw some business analogies to being sacked, but it's a funny. Coaching's a different sort of profession. I was a school teacher. I was a PE teacher. I became a deputy principal at 28. I was acting principal of a school at 32 for 18 months, and then in '95 the game was just about to go professional, and I loved school teaching, absolutely loved it. But I always had this urge to want to be better coached than I was coached, because I reckon there was only one coach I ever listened to my whole life, and that was Bob Dwyer, who coached Australia to victory in the '91 World Cup, and the rest of it was absolute rubbish. And I thought I could do much better than what had been done previously. So I took a massive gamble. I went to Japan to coach in '96. I went for about half the salary I was on in Australia, and the cost of living in Japan was substantially more than Australia. I coached a university side, Tokai University, who have about 3 universities. And the funny thing about Japan, even though rugby's, you know, a reasonably sized sport, it's about 12th in Japan. There's 500 universities play rugby in Japan, 500 universities. And they each have from 80 to 250 students, but they only play 7 competition games a year. So I had this group of 80 students. We trained something like 355 days out of the 365, and only 22 guys played 7 competition games, and the other 60 kids are just training. And one of the things I picked up just from that short period of time I was in Japan, I was there for 18 months, was just about that diligence to keep doing it, and the discipline you get, because they believe it came out of World War II. The stories that came out of World War II when obviously Japan were involved, that they followed the German practice of physical education, and it's practicing for discipline, and discipline that you have later in your life. So that was quite an interesting little period in my life. And when I got sacked on Thursday night, and I remember ringing up my wife. My wife's actually Japanese, and I said, look, I've got sacked, and she said, where are we going next? I thought that was a pretty good attitude. And by the Monday, I was coaching again in Japan. And that's one of the things I've tried to do throughout my career, and I don't know how relevant it is for people here, but I treat myself like a business. I don't treat myself as a coach, so I continually look to improve myself. I've got probably, I consult about 4 teams around the world, a couple of national teams, a club in England, a club in Japan. So when I got sacked as a national coach, I was just going to move on to the next stage of my career, because it was inevitable it was going to happen. That in the sport that we have, it's a cyclical sport. It runs in about 4 or 5 year cycles, and you're always going to have down periods, and you want to put yourself in the best position so during that down period you can get out of it as quickly as you can. Now sometimes things happen that are out of your control. That means that you're going to be in that down period for a bit longer, and that's what's happened to Australian rugby at the moment. We're in a down period for a bit longer, but it'll soon, by 2008, we'll be out of it. So you've got to make sure that, I think, and I'm sure it's the same for business, that during your good times you build your own business up so it's strong enough to get through the down times and have the resources around you to get through. The other thing I was going to talk about tonight, and I'm not going to talk too long because I'm sure everyone's thirsty and dying to have a drink next door, and I'm happy at the end to answer any questions about who I should have selected in the national side, or who I should select for the Reds, or if I go to England, who I should pick for England. You know, people in business talk about the 80-20 principle, and in rugby it is very significant. You know, that we spend 80% of our time on the basics, getting the basics right. So what we mean by that is our core skills, our catch passing, our tackling. That's one part. Then we have to win the ball, which is our line out and scrum. Then we have to be able to use the ball, and then we have to be able to defend. So we spend 80% on the basics, and most sides do. The big difference between being a good side and a great side is that next 20%. It's how you use that next 20%. And there's 3 basic areas that I've always concentrated on with teams. One is the vision or the mission of the organisation. And everyone has them, and everyone has them on the board, and you walk in and you're impressed by some. But in the end, they're all virtually the same. You know, I haven't seen too many in the number of organisations I've been in, number of books that are much different. It's how you make that vision live within your organisation. And I'll give one quick example. In the World Cup in 2003, our vision was to be a side that Australian people were proud of. So that was our vision. How did we make it live in the side? We went to the centre of Australia, out in Arnhem Land. We spent a day barramundi fishing, looking at the Aboriginal art, and then we got an Aboriginal dance party come in. They did the same dance about 10 times. It was the worst dancing I've ever seen. And then they presented us with a picture of a wallaby reaching for the star, some message sticks, and then we all sat around and talked about what the experience was going to be like under the stars in Arnhem Land. And it changed the team. It changed the team, because from that point on, just that little, we didn't plan it very well at all. And we left it a bit loose, which is not my style, but it actually worked really well. And by the end of the night, we were all painted in Aboriginal paint, and there was a real collective feeling that we were in the middle of Australia, and that we were going to represent Australia. And certainly there was a really strong desire, collective desire from the group to make sure that we did Australia proud. And I think sometimes you've got to plan these things really well, and sometimes you can be a little bit loose. But you have to do something within your organisation to make that mission or that vision live for the people within the organisation. The second thing we work very hard on is our behaviours. Again, people talk about values of organisations and how important culture is, and that's very true. But really, I think the most important thing, and what I do for a living, I modify behaviours. I change behaviours. That's all I do. So we've just spent 2 days at the Gold Coast with the Reds deciding what we feel are winning behaviours and what we feel are losing behaviours. And we're just about to sign off as a group on what we feel are winning behaviours. So an example is off-field team meeting. What's a winning behaviour? Winning behaviour means you come to that meeting, you're 10 minutes early, you have your necessary diary, you have your necessary writing equipment. Depending on what the meeting is, you're prepared and you're ready to be an active participant at that meeting. That's winning behaviour. Losing behaviour is rushing in with 1 minute to go and you haven't got your diary without a pen. And those little things count. And that's how we're going to judge ourselves. So we've got probably about 15 or 20 behaviours that we've divided into winning and losing behaviours. We're going to get the players to self-evaluate ourselves as a group. We'll evaluate ourselves as a group because behaviour, that consistent routine of behaviour is so important to win. Because as you know, the little things count the most. The last thing we look at is competitive edge. And it's finding out how you're going to beat the opposition. And there's a couple of ways of doing it. Firstly, I reckon you've got to find out what you're good at. And it depends on an organisation what resources you have, depends on where the organisation is. For instance, at Queensland, is there any Queenslanders here? This isn't going to be sent to Queensland, is it? You can't tell anyone in Queensland. Queensland is the most conservative place I've ever been. And the footballers are the same. They're conservative. They don't like taking risks. And over the last 6 years, they've tried to play a game that involves risk. I think that is inherently wrong in the players that we've got. What I want to build with them, I want to build their conservatism into their game so they are so strong at doing the simple things well, they feel so comfortable that then allows them to take risk. So for me, developing a unique Queensland style is going back to something they were good at before, because that's their educational background of the players that I have is conservative. So we're going to make that part of our unique Queensland style, and we're going to be good at that. So we want to be good at line-outs and driving balls and kicking for field position. And then we'll add to our game. But our block of our competitive edge will be that we'll be better at a couple of conservative, what could be termed conservative parts of the game. The other part, and it's the last thing I'll talk about, is just as an individual, I reckon there's a couple of ways to go, and certainly if I've experimented over the last 10 years as a coach, how do you get the best out of a player? What we're doing at the moment is not worrying about the player's weaknesses at all. Not spending any time at all on their weaknesses. What we're focusing on is what is going to make that player world class. What can he be better than everyone else in one area of his game? Because if you're better than anyone else in one area of your game, and I'm sure it goes in businesses as well, you have a competitive edge. You're better than someone else in that area. Like for instance, George Gregan, the Australian captain, that everyone always wants to talk about dropping. He can't do this, he can't do that. But I tell you what he is good at, leading a side. He's good at leading a side and manipulating a referee. He is absolutely world class at that. So you want him to keep doing that? Now, when he's really good at that and keeps doing it well, you find players then get better in their weaker areas. Because they have to spend, whilst they do still have to spend time on that competitive edge and still have to keep on trying to get that better, they tend to have to spend less time and therefore work on their weak areas. I think it's a real issue that people concentrate on the weaknesses of people. Like I had a PA at the Wallabies, and she was the nicest girl in the world, but hopeless in organisation, absolutely hopeless. Not really good for a PA for a coach who likes to be organised. You know, she'd lose things, she'd double up appointments, but if we concentrated on the social side and made that really good, the other areas improved gradually instead of concentrating on the weaknesses. You know, for us now, we've got a couple of good young kids. We've got a young number 10, Quade Cooper, who I think will go close to making the World Cup squad. He was inside centre in the Australian schoolboys this year with Kirtley Bill, who the Sydney people know about. He's the glamour boy here. This boy is better. This boy is better. And he's from a very poor family, but he's just got these instinctive ball skills. He can immediately, if he's standing here, can immediately see how many defenders are there. If he's standing there, he can immediately see how many defenders are there. You can't teach that. But he makes a lot of mistakes. We're not worrying about his mistakes at training. We're just making sure that he keeps on playing and keeps on looking what's in front of him. Because as he gets more comfortable in the surroundings and people start understanding what he's going to do, he'll make less mistakes. So they're the three things that we look at. Yeah, we try to come up with a vision and try to live the vision. We try to work out what we're going to be good at that's going to give us a competitive edge. And then secondly and thirdly, in terms of individuals, we really concentrate on the strengths of individuals and try to make them better. And at the same time, in all of that, we have a very disciplined environment. And you can't go anywhere, or you can't do anything well unless you have a disciplined environment. You know, one of the first things that struck me when I went to the Reds, that everyone said they were a happy squad. And I said to them the first time I got them, I said, how can you be happy when you're losing all the time? And they just sat there. I said, okay, from now on you're going to be unhappy, but we're going to start winning. And what happens when you start winning, they start being happy. Everyone knows that's like in your business. When you win, you start being happy and you start enjoying, but you still have to have pressure around. Last point is that we try to work in our work environment, and again, I think it's the same in business. We try to work on a psychology of certainty so that people can come to work and do their job. So they know that all the resources are there for them to do their job properly. And it's well organised, the meetings are on time, the rooms are available, there's enough resources. But at the same time, as the head coach, I've got to make sure that they're always slightly uncomfortable, so they don't get too comfortable. You know, there's a good saying that routine is good until it becomes mundane. So it's the job of the managers or the head coach, in my case, to ensure there's always that little bit of edge, so the players are still thinking, whilst I'm doing okay, I've got to do better. I've got the two number 10s in tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and 8:15. They don't know why. They probably won't sleep tonight because I want to keep them on edge. One of the number 10s who's going to the World Cup has been in. I haven't been in the office the last 2 days because I've been at a conference. Has been in doing all this catch-up work because I know he knows what I'm going to talk to him about. So I've got that edge with him. So hopefully we're going to get better performance. And as I said, if Kelly